This is a video I'm recording after 6 months of traveling around the world, and this is going to be a fairly extensive video. Obviously, the topic of this channel is microtransportation, so I'm going to start with that. I'm going to give you a ranking of the 3 cities that I have been visiting and living in this year, and these are New York, Bangkok, and Budapest. After that, if you want to hang on, I'm going to give you more information and insights based on my recent experience this year, covering everything from the environment to food to prices, economic outlook, and even a bit of a background and history of these places and where I see them going for the rest of the decade. If you just want to get some information on my opinion about public transit or microtransportation, then it's going to be right in the beginning of the video, and the rest is going to follow. So the ranking I would give to the private mobility, not only micromobility, but even cars, and either motorcycles or cars, that would be Bangkok number 1, Budapest number 2, and New York number 3. That's because obviously, since I live in New York vehicles are not as interesting or unique to me as they might be to somebody who lives abroad. If I had to choose between Bangkok and Budapest in terms of how many fun rides I have seen, I would say Bangkok comes in as number 1. Partly, they have so many scooters there, and I would start with this ADV. This is a Honda. I have been aware of this scooter for quite some time. In the US, we only get the 150cc variety of this machine. The rear brakes are drum, so this is not a very fancy machine. It costs about $5,000, but in the Far East, you can see them in 300 and even 450cc varieties. What's interesting about it, I never thought much of it because you don't see in New York all that much. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen even one of them. But they are all over the Siam, Bangkok, Phuket, Pattaya, everywhere really. And the interesting thing is it's a really handsome design. It's fairly aerodynamic. It gives you a little bit of a windshield as well that comes with the scooter, and a fairly large body. This could be looked upon as a maxi scooter, even though it only has 150cc. So if you buy a 150cc little Honda mini bike, which is actually 125cc, not even 150, but you buy, say, 150 Vespa, you're not going to get this much of a trunk and this big a body. The passenger is very comfortable on this scooter. He sits on a higher level. There's plenty of illumination front and rear. The scooter is very visible. It is a surprisingly neat design. It looks like a maxi scooter for under $5,000, and it really just has 150cc with fairly decent fuel economy as well. I don't like this all black design, but over there I saw them in all kinds of colors, and I guess if I owned one, I would put more colors onto it. And then there were the Honda Monkeys that are not the current vintage. I saw several really old ones. And the Honda Monkey was made from the 60s on through the years in so many different kind of shapes. The old ones are really cute, and a lot of them have absolutely no plastic. They are all metal, so they last forever. And the fact that some people are still riding around on a machine made in the 60s is just testimony as to how well built they were. Of course, these bikes are also very easy to repair and to maintain. None of the parts cost a lot of money if you can get them, and most of the bike is made out of metal. So I saw so many cool monkeys. I really enjoyed them. And then there were the classic Vespas. The current Vespas are not bad in design, but the design has been moved into a more blend direction, so it's less distinguishable from the other scooters out there. Whereas the old ones that were made in the 50s, 60s, those, like this one is in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the same museum which also has the Alex Moulton space frame bicycle. There is a reason why MoMA preferred to purchase this design, because this is probably the most beautiful one that they have made. And there are lots of modern Vespas in New York, but I seldom see the classics, the antiques that are still all over the place in Bangkok and elsewhere in Southeast Asia. So I really did appreciate that. Then there were the big and also the smaller Lambretta scooters. Now the smaller ones I don't care too much about. If you want to look at the small ones, this is what they look like. The wheel cutout is way too big. The whole design looks kind of bland, flimsy. It's not that cool. But the bigger ones, the new 300, and I believe they have a 350 as well, those are really cool. They are solid. The wheel cutout is not as aggressive, so this whole wheel assembly looks a lot better. The exhaust, everything. This angular design actually reminds me of a Lamborghini, believe it or not. And these are really big machines, and I saw so many of them. Unfortunately, if you go to the international website of Lambretta, you will see that there's no such thing as America, North America. There is South America, and you could perhaps buy them from the UK and import it into the US, but I'm not sure if they would let the bike in if it cannot be registered in the States. I believe they have the right to confiscate the bike. I'm not sure, you would have to check, but I don't think many people would take a chance with it. So this is mostly if you are in Europe or in Asia. This is a really, really cool scooter to get. And this is the way it looks from the back. I thought that this new back rear taillight that they designed is really cool. I like the exhaust, I like the whole thing. I would probably not want to modify it much. It's just a gorgeous big bike, very wide. What we have in the US is really, your only choice is the Vespa wide body, which at this point is costing over $8,000. So even these mid-sized scooters are beginning to get really expensive. They are getting into quality used car price range. So I don't know why two-wheelers are becoming so overpriced, but that would be the same with the Lambretta as well. If they sold it in the US, it would be just as much. So moving on to Budapest, that would have been my second choice for fun rides. This little Volkswagen Up really caught my attention. There is some kind of a rental program over there, so I didn't look at the prices, but there is some kind of a car sharing program where the cars are just left on the street and you come with a card and you pick them up. I was really tempted to try them out, but I just didn't get the time, so I never looked into it. To my knowledge, the Volkswagen Up is no longer made. They made them in 2-door and 4-door varieties, and there was a combustion engine. I don't know if it was diesel or not. Then there was an electric as well. The version I saw in Budapest was the electric version. The other thing was this BMW. This was the i3. It used to be sold in the US. It never really took off. I think the main reason was that it was really not that attractive a ride, not so typical for a BMW, and it was really expensive. I think $45,000 to start with a short range, something like 100 or 120 miles of range. But I saw a lot of them that looked really cool in Budapest with various not so boring color arrangements, and I thought highly of the original interior because everything was renewable, vegan fabrics and all that. So I think BMW was moving in the right direction when they did this. Well, what they are doing right now is they are basically reproducing their gasoline cars in electric form, and they are trying to sell that. But I don't know if that's going to work out on the long run against Tesla, because they don't have the charging network. And the charging network is the reason why Tesla is beginning to seriously depress competitors, because they are having trouble entering the electric market. So Tesla is the ruler of that because they have an easy charging option, something nobody else has so far. So this is what I have to say about personal transit. Moving on to mass transit, including the airports, the winner in this category, hands down, is Budapest. You can buy for $28 a monthly pass that covers all of this. The whole city is in it. This whole area, this is Budapest. The downtown area is really just this. But you can go everywhere on the buses and the trains and trolleys, everywhere. Everything is brand new. All the equipment is brand new. Even though the subway system, for example, is the oldest system on the continent, not in geographical Europe, because London had it maybe 4 years earlier, I believe, and Budapest was the second one. And this is what it looks like. This is these posts, basically the iron part is over 100 years old. Obviously, the original trains look different, and they have a few of those antiques in a museum, but what is running now is kind of a modern interpretation of it. And this is the number 1 line. It is really old. This is what it looks like. I think the original machine looked something like this. This is the museum part, which is pretty cool. Everything is clean. All the equipment is new. I mean, I was blown away not having seen the city for, I don't know, 8 or 10 years, how much they have built up, how effectively they have restored the city. This city was 70% razed to the ground by Allied shelling and bombardment in World War II. Berlin was, I would say, 90% destroyed. Same thing with Stalingrad, but Stalingrad was never a historic city. Dresden, 100% razed to the ground. So I've been to Berlin. That was maybe a decade ago. I thought they would never restore the city. I still don't think they will restore it. And I was shocked at how much Budapest has been not rebuilt with modern garbage architecture, but actually restored with the old historic buildings fixed up. It's just amazing. So that would be my number 1 choice. And obviously, Budapest has all these bike paths, bike rentals, e-scooter rentals, e-car rentals, car sharing. So public transit is just some of the best I have seen. I could only compare it to the Netherlands. Netherlands has a really, really good public transit system, but it is many times as expensive as the one in Budapest. Now the second one would be Bangkok. And this is what the SkyTrain looks like. It runs above ground. They also have systems that run below the ground, and the systems are independent. So even though they are cheaper to get on than New York, say you pay $1.50 or even $2 to ride one train, if you transfer onto anything else, you have to pay again. So the price is really not cheaper than New York, because in New York, I can get on the train in the Bronx and ride all the way down to JFK Airport for $3. And I can transfer any number of times. I don't have to pay extra. Transferring between the subway and the bus or train in New York is also a bit iffy. Sometimes you can, sometimes you cannot. I haven't figured it all out. In Budapest, it's an easy transfer. You have one pass. You take whatever you like. You can live on the trains and the buses all you want. So Bangkok is really not that cheap. It's not cheaper than New York if you really consider longer trips. Only if you go like a few blocks. But the system is brand new. It's safe, just like in Budapest. All the equipment is new. Everything is safe. There are really no homeless on trains. There's no graffiti. People are not getting killed and so on. New York is obviously the last choice here. I mean, we just had a recent case where somebody was set on fire by this guy who's not even supposed to be in the country. This guy from South America. I have no idea why people would travel across the continent to another country to attack some woman he had never seen. on the subway. I have no idea why people do this. So New York is the last choice when it comes to public transit. It's really overpriced, expensive, it's outdated and dirty, and it's really dangerous as well. As far as the airports are concerned, I don't have to tell you that JFK I'm not too happy with. And in general, US airports are far from being number one. I have some beautiful airports. This is Suvarnabhumi in Bangkok. I think it's one of the most beautiful airports in the world. It has this kind of shell-looking design. It may not be the best equipped. I would say that would be something like Singapore or Frankfurt. It has an air link. It is definitely clean. It is cultured. And for the first time, they were using this scanning system, this face scanner, which I also saw in Budapest. Budapest was very quick, but it's a very small airport. Suvarnabhumi is much bigger, but also very cultured, very, very attractive. I would say Suvarnabhumi is number one, Budapest number two, and as usual, JFK would come in as my least favorite. Because of this scanner thing, you just put your passport down and they scan it, and there's no line. You just go through. I was done in a minute. So that was a big help. There is a privacy concern that your scan is going into the computer, but your movements across borders is already known. It's already being scanned and tracked in computer systems. So I just don't see what difference that makes, if any at all. And finally, there was this issue in as far as Istanbul airport is concerned. Istanbul, formerly Constantinople, founded by the Emperor Constantine, is now on Turkish hand, and there are these what I call cancer machine everywhere in the world, including the US. But in Bangkok, for example, they have the two set up, and if you don't want to go into the cancer machine, you can just go through the magnetic one, which I think is far safer. It's been around for decades, for generations. We have had no problems with it. Why they would have to x-ray people's face, and especially the eyeball, which is the most sensitive, I don't know. But it's certainly scary. So I have never been in a cancer machine. And the people in Istanbul tried to push me in there. We were arguing for 10 minutes. They called some supervisor, and then finally they agreed to do a pat down, and that was the end of it. But in any case, if I'm ever made uncomfortable about this, I never visit that airport again. So Istanbul is the end, never again. As far as the rest of them, Budapest, I was coming out, so I don't see what kind of system they have. Last time I was here, that was a decade ago, they just had the magnetic gate. I don't think they have the cancer machine, but who knows. But in any case, any Bangkok, it's you have a choice. So which airport is better? I kind of like Bangkok. I mean, for how big it is, it's really well organized, and there are lots of shopping options as well. It's also the most beautiful. As far as public transit in general, I would say Budapest number one, Bangkok number two, New York number three, and as far as airports are concerned, Bangkok number one, Budapest number two, and New York number three. Moving on to clean transport and the environment in general. At first, I would say Budapest was number one. This is a city that's entirely in the first world at this point. Everything, as far as I could see, almost everything has been renovated. There's really no reason to own a car. I think people just own cars to keep up with the Joneses. But as you can see, there are electric scooter rentals, e-bikes, regular bike rentals, and parking all over the place, anywhere you want to go. There's a very effective, clean mass transit system. It's safe. I don't see why anybody would even bother with a car. There are lots of electric cars, electric scooters as well. So electric adaptation is as good as I have seen anywhere. The second place would go to New York because, although not perfect, and there is a lot of unnecessary driving, New York does have a bicycle infrastructure. And even if you want to cross over on the bridge, you can get into Lower Westchester and on the Jersey side of the Hudson as well. There's a little bit of bike infrastructure, so you can get around. It's not as good as Budapest, but it is pretty good. It's a lot more than what New York used to be like 40-something years ago when I got here. Bangkok is terrible. As you can see, Google is graying out the biking option because there is no biking. There is no greenway. There are some passages that are like old back alleys where I remember walking. Like there was this park, and I remember walking in some of those parks, but those are really just back alleys. They're not really bicycle infrastructure. Like you see these green paths here, it's like you're only supposed to go there on foot or on bike. Car is not supposed to go there. But I mean, the whole city, the transportation and the cleanliness of the city is just a disaster. And overall, the entire Thai policy or lack of any policy for the environment is really disturbing. I mean, some beaches, they didn't look this bad, but there are areas that look this bad indeed. So some places where tourists go, they clean it up and then they toss the garbage on the next beach. This is really unacceptable, and it's going on even in Phuket and even on the water. So Budapest wins this one, New York a close second, and Bangkok a very, very distant third. This whole country, the whole Thai policy has to be completely revamped for the country to be cleaned up. I am moving on to the food. The number one spot here actually goes to the US, because even though Thai and Hungarian savory foods are excellent, the Austro-Hungarian dessert cuisine is some of the best in the world. New York has an international ethnic diversity that does not compare to any of the other two. And I can go on the internet, and for example here I can get a lot of the Austro-Hungarian delicacies that I like. If I don't want to figure out how to make them, I can just go there and get them off of the internet from Etsy. There are a bunch of people who are selling stuff. I don't know why this is showing up in Thai baht. I'm no longer in the Siam. But in any case, I could get it much easier in New York than I could get them, say, in Budapest or in Bangkok. And there are even these restaurants at some of the fancier ethnic places. This is an Austrian chef who operates right next to the Metropolitan Museum in New York. He sells a lot of Austro-Hungarian delicacies, but also he made up some of his own things. Like this is a dobos cake, I can see that. He sells the Zacher, the Austrian cake, and a bunch of other things. Really very cool stuff. And New York is full of these places because of the gigantic size of the city. My number two choice would be Budapest. I especially enjoyed this massive mall from the early 1900s, from the old Austro-Hungarian days. It's a beautiful place to shop, and they really have everything. This is what the outside of it looks like. It has this beautiful Austrian style of using these tiles or mosaic to develop the roofs, and it really comes out really nice. And it also has been renovated, because it must have been totally run down after World War II and during the communist era. And they have everything. It's not just vegetables and spices. They have the dessert, they have the meats, the drinks, absolutely everything you can think of, even local street food and fast food. The third one would be the Thai stuff. The Bangkok has great savory Thai cuisine and great tropical foods, but they are really weak on, for example, spirits. There really aren't any local wines or beers that are so good. It's really just the Thai stuff with some Western things stuck in here and there, but it's just here and there, just little samples of it. You really cannot get good Italian or French or Austro-Hungarian foods in this town. So as much as I like the tropical food of the Siam, and I would eat their excellent watermelon every day, and I would eat the spicy chicken recipes and so on, it's probably the more limited, it's just more restricted to what the country produces. So I would put them on to third place. Moving on to prices and the economy, the number one spot goes to Bangkok, Budapest number 2, New York number 3, obviously the most expensive and the one that gives you the least. What gives you the most for the money is still Bangkok. Prices have gone up like crazy, but still compared to Budapest, consider that for less money than what I paid in Budapest, not to mention New York, you can get an apartment that has a spacious swimming pool, a rooftop place where you can see the city. There is a gym included practically with every condominium. It's not the kind of classical, beautiful architecture that you get in Budapest, for example. So you can see that these are all prefab, cheap-looking box buildings. But on the other hand, when you're inside of them, you do get a lot of luxuries. And so I would say Bangkok definitely is the place to go. But on the other hand, the flight to get over there is no longer as cheap as it once was. What I used to do was I would go to this wonderful hospital, Bumrungrad, right in the center of Bangkok, and I would save back half of my flight, if not the whole flight, on the dentist and the dermatologist and the things that I used to do. That game is now over. They are charging American prices. I was absolutely shocked at how much they were asking for a dental implant, basically the same money as my Park Avenue dentist proposed last year. So I didn't even do it. And, also I should mention for entertainment, a lot of men used to go to Bangkok to get laid, but considering how much money it costs to go over there and to rent a hotel room and so on, round-trip flights are minimum $1,500 these days. So plus the hotel. For that kind of money, you could literally rent a wife in New York or Miami. So I just don't see the point. If you're not interested in the culture, the cuisine, the beaches, the monuments, the cool stuff that drew me to this country to begin with some 2 decades ago, then there's probably no point. If you just want to have fun, if you just want to party, you can take care of that right where you are. And of course, Budapest you can get anything you want in any of these cities, but Budapest is going to be a bit more expensive. I would say noticeably more expensive, but still prices are softer than New York. New York would be the most expensive, but of course you can get everything just like you would in Bangkok. Finally, a little bit about the politics and the history of the 3 places. I would say politically the safest place is Bangkok. Budapest is number 2, and New York is a very distant number 3, and I'm going to show you why I think that. Well, let's go to the Siam first. Basically, they have historically been trying to be as neutral as possible. The Kingdom of the Siam never aspired to amass an empire. They were taken to pieces by the French for the most part during the colonial era, but the French did not dare take off more than about 20% of the country because of a friendship developed by an earlier king, not the current king, not this guy. But generations ago, there was a Thai king who contacted the US president and formed a friendship with him, which the French were aware of and did not dare to outright try to occupy the country. Also, during the 2 world wars, they tried to collaborate with everybody. They collaborated with the Japanese to prevent an outright invasion of the country. So they lost some land because of colonialism. The entire country of Laos, a good chunk of Cambodia came out of the Siam. Unfortunately, they lost some territory to Burma as well. But for the most part, most of the country has never been occupied by a foreign power. There are not many countries that can say that. Maybe Switzerland and Russia in the West, that's about it. Now, the old king he shot his brother in the head, and that's how he forced himself into the throne. But he was generally regarded as a good king. He tried to make people forget how he became king by being good to his subjects. And now there is this new king. He's a really very awful king. He's constantly in foreign countries. He doesn't care about the problems of his country. So there are problems, but for the most part, the country is still going to be neutral. So if we end up in a nuclear war, which I predict is going to happen, probably in 26 or 27, maybe even later, who knows? The more time we have to prepare, the better. That's what I say. In any case, if it comes to an all-out nuclear confrontation, the country is pretty far south, pretty far away from any kind of U.S.-China or U.S.-Russia conflict, so they're not going to be directly affected. Now, I should say, the second place about Budapest, here is Orbán, the prime minister. He is maintaining good relationships with Putin, and he has had historically good relationship with the American Republicans as well. When they were a part of Austria-Hungary, they actually opposed a mobilization against the Serbs. And if the Austrians listened to them, the empire could have survived. But they did not listen, and the rest is history. They went into a conflict that ended up being turned into a world war, and the whole thing fell apart. So they are trying to do the same thing that they did before, trying to be neutral, trying to persuade the bigger powers to not fight, or if they are going to fight, at least to leave them out of it. And so I think Europe is hopeless, especially countries like Poland, the Baltics, northern Germany, southern and eastern Scandinavia. Those are in the eye of the conflict, if there is going to be a conflict. Budapest is relatively safely away from these places, but not nearly as far away as Bangkok. So it's not as safe as that other place. The reason I decided to return to the US via Budapest is precisely because it seems to be a safe place. They are pretty friendly with everybody. They are getting a lot of armed wrestling and pressure from NATO and from the EU, but still, it's not going to be an open attack on Budapest. And then there is New York. Believe it or not, 2 years ago, New York City published a video to prepare people on what to do should the city face a nuclear attack. And New York City is the #1 nuclear target in the US. If the Russia, Chinese, anybody should attack the US with nukes, New York and DC are the first cities to go. And probably New York even before DC, just because that would be decapitating the monster. So if they attack the US, they would probably fire at New York and DC and probably some of the more important Area 51 type military installations. And so New York City published this video that if a nuclear bomb detonates in Manhattan, then you should get inside and close the window, move away from the windows. That's really going to help. If something like Satan or one of the modern nuclear cluster bombs should explode 6 nuclear shells on Manhattan, that's really going to help that you get inside and close the doors and the windows. And stay tuned, follow the media. Like as if there will be a media if they detonate everything. All right, so that's my opinion of it. Definitely Bangkok is the safest place. Budapest, pretty good. I was absolutely blown away by how much they have renovated the city. It's definitely in the first world at this point. I would not say that about Bangkok. I can't say that about New York. New York at this point is like a third world city because it has a small area of very rich people and everybody else is increasingly down. There are homeless villages, homeless people everywhere. So it cannot no longer be regarded as a first world country. just as Bangkok and the Siam is not a first world country, just because there are super rich people living in Bangkok and there are ultra luxury shopping malls, multi-level towers of opulence in Bangkok, because that just affecting a smaller segment of society. In fact, if I looked into trends, at least I see Thai society improving, and there is a small but rising middle class, whereas in the US there is an increasingly shrinking one. This wraps up this entire video. If you have any questions, feel free to post, and make sure to check out some of the links I put below. Check out my short videos, because I shot I don't know how many dozens of short videos, probably more than 100, maybe hundreds. I don't know how many videos I have shot, and the journey is still not over. I still have another month in Europe before returning after the inauguration, hopefully into an improving US.